We thought you'd just keep paying. Those were the first words out of my mother's mouth when I opened the envelope. The one they never meant for me to see. I'm Emily Crawford, 34 years old, born and raised in Asheville, North Carolina. I work as a senior financial analyst for a mid-sized investment firm. Not flashy, not glamorous, but solid. Every penny I have, I've earned the hard way. Grinding through college with part-time jobs, clawing my way up from unpaid internships, and saving until I could finally breathe without checking my bank balance every night. Growing up, my parents, Lisa and Greg Crawford, always preached about family loyalty. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable, as they like to say. My younger brother, Ryan, was the golden boy. Charming, athletic, the life of every party. Me, I was the planner, fixer, the one who made sure everyone got home safe at the end of the night. After college, when Ryan struggled to find his footing, I helped. When Dad lost his job at the manufacturing plant, I stepped in. When Mom's medical bills piled up after her surgery, I covered them. Quietly, without being asked. First it felt right. It's what family does, right? But slowly something shifted. The gratitude faded, replaced by expectation. It started with loans that were never repaid. Temporary help that turned permanent. They needed help with the mortgage on the lake house. I wired the money. Ryan's second DUI fine. I bailed him out. Mom's urgent car repair. I footed the bill. Each time there were promises. We'll pay you back, sweetheart, as soon as things settle down. You're a blessing to this family. I wanted to believe them. God, I did. Then 2 months ago, they asked me to come up to the lake house for a family talk. The house was beautiful once. A rustic 2-story overlooking the still waters of Lake Lure. Now it felt faded, neglected. The porch sagged. Paint peeled from the siding. The once pristine lawn was patchy and overgrown. Inside, I found them gathered in the living room, tension crackling in the air. Mom perched on the edge of the sofa, twisting a tissue in her hands. Dad stood by the fireplace, staring into the empty grate. Ryan slouched in an armchair, arms crossed, looking anywhere but at me. "We need your help," Dad said finally, voice gruff. I braced myself. "The taxes on the lake house are due," Mom added. "And the repairs. Well, you know how much upkeep costs." "How much?" I asked, keeping my voice even. Mom slid a folder across the coffee table. Property tax notice. Repair estimates. Over $18,000. "We were hoping," she began. I swallowed hard. This wasn't new. Paid before. But something inside me twisted tight. An unease I couldn't name. "I'll think about it," I said. That's when the envelope slipped out from under the tax papers. Official looking. Before I could stop myself, I picked it up. "Emily, that's not..." Mom started reaching out. But I'd already seen it. Trust fund. Not for me. For Ryan. $250,000. Locked in a cozy portfolio. Growing quietly while I drained my accounts to keep them afloat. I flipped through the papers, my heart pounding. Contributions from my parents for years. Steady deposits, even during the times they'd cried poor to me. "This," I whispered, the room spinning. "This is for Ryan." No one spoke. Finally, Mom muttered, "He needs stability. And I don't." My voice cracked. "Paid your bills. I've kept this house from foreclosure. I've sacrificed years of my life." Dad shifted uncomfortably. Ryan just stared at the floor. "You're strong," Mom said softly, as if that made it right. "You always figure it out." There it was. Not love. Not respect. Utility. I was their safety net. And they'd counted on me staying quiet, staying loyal. I set the envelope down carefully, as if it might burn me. "I'll think about the taxes," I said again, voice icy. Then I turned and walked out, the screen door slamming behind me. In the cool evening air, I stood by my car, shaking. Anger. A bone-deep weariness I couldn't shake. For years I'd been the good daughter. The reliable one. The afterthought. Not anymore. Not after this. As the stars blinked to life over the dark water, I made a silent promise. They wanted to see what would happen when I stopped holding everything together. Fine. I would show them, and they would never forget it. I sat in my car long after the meeting ended, the engine ticking softly as it cooled against the chilly evening air. The HOA bill rested on the passenger seat. A quiet, damning reminder of everything they expected from me, and everything they thought I would still give. I couldn't even bring myself to drive. I just sat there, staring blankly through the windshield as the streetlights flickered on, one by one. The betrayal stung sharper than I'd imagined. Not just because of the money, but because of how little they thought of me. Not even a conversation, not even an apology, just expectation. I thought back to all those late nights trading stocks, the anxiety of risking my tiny savings, the hollow victories when I barely scraped by. And somehow I was still the one expected to foot the bill while they built vacations and new cars around my back. I wasn't crying. Not exactly. It was more like leaking. Silent tears that slipped down without permission, blurring the bright streetlights into messy halos. For years I thought being independent meant staying silent, handling things without complaint, earning their approval with self-sacrifice. But standing there today, looking into Dad's hard eyes, feeling Mom's empty silence, hearing my sister's entitled voice, I realized something brutal. They didn't admire my strength. They resented it, because it meant they could use me without ever having to be accountable. I wiped my face roughly with my sleeve, furious with myself for crying. This wasn't about sadness anymore. It was about survival. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and scrolled through my contacts until I found her name. Rachel McAllister, my college roommate, my best friend, and, thankfully, a damn good lawyer now. Rang once, twice. She answered, her voice warm, worried. What's wrong? The dam broke. Not with sobbing. Not with rage. Just with words spilling over each other like a flood. I told her everything. About the taxes. The secret trust fund. The staged meeting to guilt trip me. The lifetime of sacrifices no one even noticed. She listened without interrupting. And when I finally ran out of steam, her voice was steel. You're done giving, Emily, she said. You've given enough. A shudder ran through me. Half fear, half relief. What do I do, Rach? I whispered. They'll lose the house if I don't pay. Dad said. It's on me. They made that choice when they hid the truth from you, she replied sharply. And legally, you owe them nothing. You're not listed on the deed. You're not liable for those taxes unless you've signed something. I hadn't. I knew that much. Rachel continued, her words crisp and deliberate. You need documentation. Every payment you made, every wire, every receipt. Build a record of your contributions. You don't have to sue them. But you need leverage. Leverage, echoed. She chuckled darkly. Honey, family only respects what they can't ignore. If they want to keep using you, make sure it costs them something real. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Rachel was right. This wasn't about revenge. This was about reclaiming the pieces of myself I'd handed over too easily. For far too long. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by piles of old bank statements, receipts, tax bills, vacation expenses I'd foolishly labeled family gifts. Each document was a tiny betrayal. Each number a reminder that my loyalty had been a one-way street. At 3 a.m., when the rest of the world slept, I created a folder on my laptop. Family contributions. Evidence. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't scared. I wasn't broken. I was building something stronger. Quiet. Invisible armor. One line item at a time. The next morning, I sat in the muted gray light of my apartment, a mug of black coffee cooling untouched by my elbow, and stared at the growing digital fortress I was building. Every deposit, every wire transfer, every automatic payment linked to the cabin, every emergency loan for Megan, all documented, cross-referenced, catalogued. It was overwhelming to see it laid out so starkly. The sheer volume of my generosity, and the absolute vacuum of gratitude that had followed it. At noon, Rachel called again. I answered on the first ring. "Hey," she said, skipping the greetings. "I talked to a friend of mine. Specializes in financial mediation between family members. If you want, I can set up a consultation." I hesitated, chewing my bottom lip, the taste of stale coffee lingering. "Will that escalate things too fast?" I asked quietly. Rachel's voice softened. "It doesn't have to. Right now it's about showing you're serious. You're no longer the Bank of Emily, handing out no-interest loans at the cost of your sanity." I smiled faintly. The first real smile in days, maybe ever. "Set it up," I said. "I'm ready." At afternoon, I printed out a neat, brutal stack of evidence. I labeled it simply, "Family Contributions, Emily Carson." I slid it into a stiff leather folder and placed it next to my keys. There was a strange calm inside me now, a stillness like the ocean right before a hurricane. It was time to stop playing the part they had written for me. The dutiful daughter, the silent supporter, the endless giver. It was time to introduce them to the real me, the woman who knew her own worth, and wasn't afraid to act on it anymore. 2 days later, the meeting was set at my parents' house, the same cozy craftsman home where we'd spent Christmas mornings and summer barbecues, where I'd once scraped my knees learning to ride a bike under Dad's proud gaze. Funny how betrayal could turn even the fondest places sour. I pulled into the driveway at exactly 5 p.m. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the trees, bathing the house in a golden glow that felt almost sarcastic. Megan's silver SUV was already there, gleaming like a trophy. Course, I tightened my grip on the folder, took a slow breath, and climbed the front steps one deliberate stride at a time. When I knocked, Mom answered, her smile tight, eyes flickering with something like hope, or maybe fear. "Emily," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "We're so glad you came." I nodded once, offering no warmth, only business. Inside, Dad stood by the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back like a general ready to deliver ultimatums. Megan perched on the edge of the sofa, her manicured nails tapping impatient rhythms on her phone. "Let's sit," Dad said curtly. Not a request, command. Some habits died hard. I chose the armchair farthest from him, crossing my legs neatly, laying the folder in my lap like a shield. There was a beat of tense silence, the air thick with the ghosts of unspoken expectations. Dad cleared his throat. "We're here because the taxes on the Bear Creek property are overdue," he began, his tone brisk. "We assumed you'd continue handling them, as you always have." Megan chimed in, her voice falsely sweet. "It's not that big a deal, Em. Just cover it, and everything goes back to normal." Normal. As if normal had ever been fair. I smiled thinly, opened the folder with a soft, deliberate sound, and began to speak. "In the past 5 years," I said evenly, "I have paid over $115,000 in property taxes, vehicle expenses, medical bills, and family vacations." Megan's mouth fell open. Dad stiffened visibly. I continued, each word a hammer, each fact a nail sealing the coffin of their illusions. "I have documented every payment, every transfer, every expense I covered without expectation of repayment, because I believed we were a family that supported each other." I lifted my gaze, meeting Dad's shocked stare without flinching. But I was wrong. The silence that followed was deafening. Only the quiet hum of the refrigerator filled the space. Finally, Mom spoke, her voice trembling. Sweetheart, you never said. You never asked. I shouldn't have had to, I interrupted softly. And now, I'm done paying for a family that never once thought to pay me back, or even say thank you. Dad's jaw clenched. Megan looked like she might cry. Or scream. Or both. Stood, slow and calm, closed the folder, tucked it under my arm. As for the taxes, I said, my voice cutting through the tension like glass, I'll be paying for exactly one property from now on. And it's not Bear Creek. Megan's voice cracked first. But you can't just let it go into foreclosure. It's Dad's favorite place. It's our family's. I shrugged, already walking toward the door. You should have thought about that, I said, before you decided I was only valuable when I was useful. And then, without another word, I walked out. I didn't look back as I pulled out of the driveway. Didn't glance at the windows where I knew they were watching me leave. The old Emily would have second-guessed herself. Would have cried the whole drive home. Would have texted an apology she didn't owe. Not anymore. I drove straight to Rachel's house. Her porch light spilling golden warmth into the twilight. She opened the door before I could even knock. Come in, she said simply. No judgment, no pity. Just the solid grounding presence I needed. We sat at her kitchen table. Mugs of chamomile tea between us. And I told her everything. The confrontation. The silence. The way Dad's face twisted like I'd slapped him. Rachel listened. Her expression unreadable. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said one thing. You did exactly what you needed to do. A tear slipped down my cheek. Not sadness. Not regret. Relief. A freedom I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. Over the next few weeks, the fallout came in waves. First, angry texts from Dad. Accusations of betrayal. Warnings that I was destroying the family. Megan's desperate calls. Voice wobbling between rage and tears. Begging me to reconsider. To remember that family comes first. Funny. Family had always come first. But only when it benefited them. Finally. Silence. The most deafening noise of all. I expected guilt to creep in. Expected the old habits to claw their way back. It didn't. Instead, I poured my energy into reclaiming my own life. I doubled down on my investments. Started planning a trip to Italy. A dream I'd shelved for years because family obligations always came first. I even toured a cozy little property near the coast. Not fancy. Not flashy. But mine. A new kind of sanctuary. One crisp morning. As the first leaves of fall began to scatter across the sidewalks, a letter arrived. Thick cream-colored envelope. No return address. Is it? Formal notice. Bear Creek's property taxes had not been paid. Late fees were piling up. The county was preparing to seize the property. I stared at the paper, feeling nothing. No pang of regret. No ache of nostalgia. They had chosen this path the moment they decided my worth was conditional. Let them lie in the bed they had made. I poured a fresh cup of coffee, set the letter aside, and booked my flight to Italy. But life has a funny way of circling back, of making sure unfinished business finds you. One chilly Friday evening, as rain drizzled against my windows, the intercom buzzed. I frowned. Wasn't expecting anyone. I pressed the speaker button. Yes, it's Dad, came the crackling reply. Please, I need to talk. A beat of silence stretched between us. I could almost hear his breathing. And even desperate. Against my better judgment, I buzzed him in. The elevator ride must have felt endless for him. Because when he stepped into my hallway, he looked smaller somehow. Older. The weight of his pride finally crushing him. Emily, he said, voice cracking. We're losing the lake house. I said nothing. Only watched. Waiting. He swallowed hard. "We need your help." There it was. The real reason for his visit. Not an apology. Not a reckoning. Plea. "Why should I help?" I asked softly. He looked startled, as if the question itself was an act of cruelty. Because we're family," he stammered. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, and said the words I'd waited my whole life to say. Family doesn't exploit one child while building a fortune for another. And call it love. His face crumpled. Years of denial finally crumbling under the truth. "We made mistakes," he said hoarsely. "I made mistakes. Please, Emily. I'm asking you. Not as a father asking his daughter, but as a man who's lost everything." For a long moment, I said nothing, only let the rain patter between us. A soft, steady heartbeat to the death of old illusions. Finally I spoke. "You built your life on my sacrifices without ever asking what it cost me." I straightened, my voice firm. "I'm done paying." Dad blinked, tears pooling, but I didn't flinch. He bowed his head, defeated, and walked away. I closed the door quietly behind him, sealing the past outside with the rain. The days that followed felt lighter. The absence of their voices, their demands, left a kind of quiet I'd never known before. It wasn't emptiness, it was peace. A space where guilt no longer gnawed at the edges of my days. I spent my mornings on my tiny balcony, a mug of steaming coffee in hand, watching the city wake up, feeling like I was finally part of it, not trapped behind someone else's expectations. I started saying yes to things I used to postpone. A hiking trip with Rachel to the Smokies. A weekend riding workshop I'd dreamed about for years. A puppy, a scrappy little rescue named Bailey, who filled my apartment with clumsy, chaotic joy. Life wasn't perfect. There were still moments when a pang of old sadness would tug at me, when I'd pass a family laughing together and wonder why mine couldn't have been that way. But then Bailey would leap onto my lap, tongue out, tail wagging, pure unconditional love. And I'd remember, I had chosen better. I had broken the cycle. Months later, spring came early, and with it, a letter from a local real estate agency. The Bear Creek house was officially on the market. Dad and Megan couldn't afford to save it, not without the money they'd so carefully hoarded for themselves. I folded the letter and set it on the counter, smiling to myself. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't cruelty. It was consequences, delivered not by my hand, but by the choices they made, and the ones I refused to make anymore. One Saturday evening, Rachel and I sat on a blanket in the park. The sky overhead painted in strokes of lavender and gold. Bailey snuggled between us, snoring softly. We didn't talk much. We didn't have to. Finally, she nudged me with her shoulder. "You good?" I looked out across the fields. Families playing, couples laughing, dogs chasing kites. Life, messy and beautiful, unfolding without permission or apology. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was standing outside of it, waiting for someone to let me in. I smiled. A real, deep smile that warmed all the way through. "I'm better than good," I said. "I'm free." Rachel clinked her soda can against mine. "To freedom. And to never apologizing for knowing your own worth." "To freedom," I echoed, the words tasting sweeter than any apology I never got. As the sun dipped behind the trees, I realized something. The real revenge wasn't letting their house fall apart. It wasn't walking away when they begged. The real revenge was building a life so full of peace, strength, and quiet joy that their betrayal no longer had a place in it. I didn't have to win their approval. I didn't have to carry their burdens. I didn't have to keep proving I was enough. I had always been enough. They just never deserved to see it. Now, I was living a life so good, they wouldn't even recognize the woman they'd tried to keep small. The best revenge, I realized, wasn't revenge at all. It was simply building a better life. And every step I took forward, every sunrise I greeted with hope instead of heaviness, every night I fell asleep with a smile instead of a knot in my chest, was a victory they could never take away.